Welcome to Mac and Blue, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Blue, head to www.macandblue.com, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Mac and Blue. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, president and co-founder of Blue Wave. I'm lucky enough to have Chad Gill on today. As the audience knows, I always like to give just a little bit of background. We met on a rehabilitation forum. I'm just kidding. Chad and I think we got introduced through friends, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. And I was fortunate enough to be on his podcast, which we'll get into details later. And it's not that we try to always pay it back, but Chad has interesting content and something befitting of the audience. So a lot of times we do this quid pro quo type thing. And so welcome, Chad. I'm glad to have you today.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be on.
Yeah, Chad's based out of Virginia. Don't hold that against him. We have a global audience here. So, just to give a little background of Chad's got a formal degree in mechanical engineering at VMI, which is the Virginia Military Institute. He also was the founder of Concreate, which was a concrete flooring company. He sold in 2022 or recently?
2023, yeah.
2023. He had that for over 20 years. He's also the founder and, head everything of Laminin Coaching, which we'll get into, and also recently started VAs4Construction, which we'll probably spend a lot of time on today's podcast talking about that. So with that, Chad, you know how it works is everyone kind of wants to know a little bit about a background. And so if you can just describe kind of you know what I mean, not so much the upbringing, but just kind of your background and then how we got into construction. Then we can kind of go into how you formed the Concrete and the maturation through all the other companies before we get into the meat of the podcasting and everything else that you've done. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say Chad's podcast is called Get the Intel Podcast. So for those of you that are watching, make sure you check that out. And we'll mention it a number of times throughout our episode today as well. So again, the mic is yours, Chad.
Hey, thanks. JJ, appreciate your time. Grew up on a farm in Virginia, the Commonwealth, great state, it's excellent. Then went to a military college because I don't know if I'd have made it at a real college. I think structure was probably a good idea for me.
Was that your decision or your parents'?
It was my decision. My parents, my brother went to the same college, ironically, 3 years ahead of me. And when my parents dropped my brother off, they're like, oh, this is great. He needs this. My mom and dad dropped me off, and my mom looked at me and goes, I don't know why you chose this. We're not even sure you're going to be able to do it, but good luck.
But yeah, it felt like a vote of confidence from your parents.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And my dad looked at me and he's like, he said, hey, we'll see you after, at Thanksgiving. If you need to leave here before then, head west. And we lived east of that college. So it was very apparent that I was dropped off and that was it, which is good. It's sometimes you got to burn.
Just out of curiosity, was it just you and your brother, or were there other siblings?
Oh, no, I have a golden sister that is 6 years younger than me, 9 younger than my brother, who never lifted a hay bale or fed a cow or anything of the similar.
You're the forgotten middle child. It explains everything.
Yeah, glaze over it. We're destined to be a sociopath or a leader or somewhat both. So came out of that engineering degree, loved engineering, went into the nuclear field, did that for 5 years, then made the natural transition to concrete polishing. I don't know how that actually works. I mean, I loved my job. I traveled a lot. We started having children, and travel and kids don't typically mix well. And so
what was that? Chad, what was that business? What was your specialization? Like, what were the projects?
I was a machine design engineer, and then also I was a field crew leader for it. So I spent 6 months of the year, 3 on, 3 off, 3 in the office, 3 in the field, and vice versa. it was weird because the guy that hired me was head of engineering when I interviewed and got hired. And when I showed up for work, he was head of field services. And so he pulled me in his office and goes, hey, we got reorganized when you were, finishing your college. And you're the only engineer that works for me. He goes, I'm head of field services now. And we actually hate engineers. So don't tell anybody you're an engineer. So for the 3 years, I worked in the field, and all the field guys wondered what I did when I wasn't in the field. And when the people in the office who were engineers wondered where I disappeared to 3 months at a time. And I was actually in the field one time working for a guy, and as a site leader, he pulled me in his office and says, hey, Chad, I've been at this company for 3 years. He said, Chad, you got a real knack for numbers, man. He goes, of all the people, you're just hell on numbers. He said, I went to bat for you because I think you got real potential in them. The companies agreed to send you back to school. And I was like, man, that's fantastic. I was like, would I be getting like master's in engineering or master's in business? Because I kind of have half of both, which is really nothing. And he's like, wait. You've been to college? So apparently I can hide my knowledge well.
You didn't tell him that you were in the CIA as well, did you?
Yeah, exactly. It was funny because he looked at me and he said the same thing my boss said. He goes, what's your degree in? And I was like, engineering. He goes, man, don't tell anybody. We hate engineers. I was like, oh, I get it.
You're from that fraternity out there. You're part of the Spook Nation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, so it was fun. It was a great job. I learned a lot. You got to I loved working night shifts, so I got to have a lot more responsibility than I should have had. And, got to do things and learned a lot there. And that eventually got me to start my own company. That was, my dad owned a swimming pool business. We started resurfacing pool decks, and that grew into commercial floor polishing and grinding and working all up and down the East Coast. And we ventured out west a couple of times, like North Dakota or something, but Denver once.
What were go back to when you started that? What were the trials and tribulations that you can remember?
Oh gosh. Figuring out, there was I actually went from nuclear to consulting, and from consulting, they immediately wanted to put me in sales and traveling, and that wasn't going to work for me. That the whole reason was to be home with our kids. And so and the guy gave me an ultimatum, and I took the third option, which was turn in my notice. And I called my wife and I was like, hey, I'm quitting. She goes, well, you can do anything but go work for your dad. So I went and worked for my dad for like 8 months, and that was terrible. It was as bad as she said it was going to be, and then some. But that's where I figured out that concrete resurfacing was something that we could do. And then the whole goal was to build countertops. And what I found out is that countertops were super artistic, but no matter how much you charge, I couldn't make money at scale doing it. And I'm very good at doing a lot of things, which I know sounds super arrogant, but what it really means is I suck at teaching people how to do things. And that is the scalability of a business, is how well can you delegate? And I was terrible at delegation. And once you get good at delegating, as you well know, that's a superpower. That is the best way to grow. Is what is it now? My mantra is the best way to get something done is to have somebody else do it. And because, do the thing that only you can do, and then get rid of everything else. And then like I did strategic coach for a while. They're like, find your unique genius. And I couldn't figure out what it was that I was really, really good at. And so the guy said, well, that's simple, Chad. Keep getting things off of you, and whatever you're left with will be what it is. He goes, but if you procrastinate about it, if you don't do it well, if you don't like doing it, that's not it. Get somebody else to do that stuff.
So what precipitated the sale of the concrete business? Were you just done? Did you get an offer that you couldn't refuse? Was it wife telling you to quit? What was it?
None of those, which is funny. I'd started this other business, Laminin Coach, and then VAs4Construction was an offshoot.
Okay, so you had started those before. Got it.
Yeah, and I fell in love with them. And in contracting, it's very litigious now. And it had gotten to the point where, I'm 50 years old. So I've been in just about every conceivable situation I was going to be in. I knew how they were going to go, pretty much knew how they were going to end up. But it was new for the other person every time. But for me, I was bored out of my mind. And then I had a general manager who got a great offer with a GC. And so he left, and I was like, well, I either got to train a new GM, it's a 2-year process, or run it myself, or, at that sheer moment of weakness, that the third option was obviously to, just close it. And my wife was like, whoa, don't do it. I'm big on processes and documenting. So we had something we could sell. And so I just called 2 people, one on Monday, and I was like, hey, we need to put these 2 companies together, and now is the time. And he was excited because he thought I was buying him. And then once we explained that he was buying me, turned out to be not the case. And then the second person said, hey, I'll see you on Thursday. And by Thursday afternoon, we had something that we could work with. And I was like, got me the freedom I wanted. That is not how you should sell a business. I'm a business coach now, and I can tell you that is not how you get the most for your company. But my scoreboard wasn't shown in dollar signs. What I wanted was not money. I mean, everybody wants money, I guess, but I wanted freedom. I wanted to be able to go do the thing I wanted to do, and this deal allowed me to do that.
Fair statement. So,
there comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
let's go all over on these tangents now. So let's say in that 20 year, paradigm or continuum that was your concrete company, when did you start Laminin and why? And tell the audience what the meaning of it is.
Okay, so Laminin has 2 meanings, depending on where you land in our conversations. The first is more scientific. Laminin is a protein in your body, and that protein doesn't really do anything in particular. It's a facility.
A lot like Chad. Oh, mic drop.
It is literally me. I don't do a lot. I can facilitate, connect a lot of things, do stuff. If you're looking for activity, that's not me. Connectivity, that's me.
That was beautifully stated. I remember that one. Okay, go ahead.
I love it. So I love that. I love that idea. Faith is a big part of me. And if you look at that laminin protein, the molecular model resembles a cross. And it was part of a Louis Giglio sermon where he talked about it. And it talked, for me, that was a lot of the connecting different components of my life and stuff that are all intertwined in my faith. So it gave me a good place to be able to have both conversations, either scientific based or faith based. And that was a challenge to me from a good friend that, hey, you're in construction, you're faithful, but you don't I guess espouse it or stuff like that. And what could you do that would make that more open to other people who are, might be in the same place you are? And I was like, oh, well, I'll just name my company that. How about that? He seemed to agree, so we did. I did.
But back to my initial question, Chad, when was that? Like halfway through your 20 years, or where was that in the?
Yeah, that was 2 years ago. So right before, about a year before I sold, and it was because back in like 2020, I needed another project manager, but I couldn't find one, and then I probably couldn't afford one or didn't want to pay for one. Those are hard to distinguish between the two. And it's just like what you can do, what you want to do is different. But so I got a assistant from the Philippines. I actually got 5 assistants from the Philippines in a row. And after the 4th one failed, I started to think maybe it wasn't them, maybe it was me. Then I work on my process a little bit there. And then the 5th one was amazing. And she's with me today, Becca. And she did a great job. And she became indispensable within months. And she allowed our project managers to do, probably 80% more work because when you think about all the things that can be done remotely, it's huge. And while it's not 80% of the value of the job, it's 80% of the activity. All of the data management, the gathering, the collecting, the prepping, the follow-up, the ordering, the checking schedules, all of that stuff you can do without being on site. And what I needed was my site person to be able to do more of what I hired him to do. Go look at jobs, go walk jobs, go see the punch lists, go solve conflicts in the field. And that took less time than all of the documentation that I needed them also to do so that we could, play in this litigious field and be well prepared with paperwork.
So if I hear you correctly, Chad, you were your own first client then?
For sure. Yeah, in a terrible.
Laminin, you basically built Laminin on the premise and the chassis of, hey, I've got a problem in my Concreate, and I'm going to solve it by X and Y and Z, and then it just materialized from there. Did I hear that correctly?
You did, except for it gives me more credit, because what really happened was I did it, and then another friend said, you should make that a business, but not before you get me one. So I got him one, and then I made it a business, which it was awesome. I'm glad that he did, because then it showed me that I could replicate it. And then it just grew. We hired more within my own company, and then my network of people that I worked with just started to notice. They're like, hey, who's this person calling me? They're really good. Maybe they have a little bit of an accent, that kind of thing. Where are they? Where'd you find them? And then it just kind of grew from there. And now we have about 35 people in the Philippines now and a couple in South America. And it's grown.
But we're still talking about Laminin Consulting, right? At this.
Well, Laminin. So,
or is it morphed into the VAs for construction?
Yeah, Laminin Coach is now just the coaching side, and VAs4Construction is where we spun off, and it's still the same business, but just different, different chapters of the book, I guess.
Can you, Chad, for the audience sake, can you kind of, you don't have to mention names, of course, but can you give some like anecdotal type evidence or just some testimonials of like, do some storytelling with the audience about like, what is your typical coaching client versus what is the VAs4Construction? And then let's get even more granular. VAs is virtual assistants for construction, correct? Isn't that the acronym? Okay. But anyway, you know what I'm asking. If you can just kind of go off on each kind of channel there and just help describe it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the one that's most straightforward. VAs4Construction, which was the niche, and then what I tell my coaching clients is a lot. Niches are in the riches are in the niche. The tighter your niche, the better you're going to be at, the more money you'll make doing it. So we don't do VAs for dental offices or hair salons and stuff like that, but we do them for construction companies because that's what we know. And so we provide those specifically to support estimators, project managers, and strangely enough, superintendents. And people are like, well, how in the world do you have a VA for superintendent? Well, it turns out the guy who's really good at pushing subs and nailing nails and building houses or buildings or whatever, not always your keyboard warrior, but you need all that data. And so we'll actually have a VA dedicated to a series of superintendents, and they'll call them during the day and ask them questions about the job, and then they'll document it. Or our favorite is we get the superintendent to shoot us a less than 2-minute long video every morning, every day at lunch, and at the end of the day, and just walk the job, showing me a video of what's going on, telling me what they're doing. Then our VAs can pull screenshots from the video and create daily reports and update all the software on our progress and when it's ready to bill and things like that.
How do you handle, okay, so I've got a million questions for you. How do you handle the different proprietary softwares for your client then? Like how are they versed in Procore versus Red Team versus JetBuild versus, the Flugelbinder?
Yeah, so we supply the person and the process. And then so we fold them into your team or whatever. If you're a Red Team company, then and the great thing about Procore, Red Team, a lot of these ones, they have their online universities and training hubs. So we can just say, all right, look, one of our people is $3,000 a month. For the first month, you could afford to just put them in that university and have them become an expert at it or very close to it. And then we integrate them. And then we have experience with some of them. And so we'll help them through that. And then as that VA is learning the process of whatever your softwares are that you're using, we're documenting those as well for two reasons. One, we need our VAs to be reproducible. because once you get one, you tend to get a second. And then we want to make sure that we have redundancy if one of our VAs leaves or needs to leave or something like that. We can bring somebody else in and already document the systems that they're going to use.
All right, thank you for that one. Next question: What about the workflow and the amount of workflow? Like, let's say you've got a VA and a company just consumes almost 100% of that VA, and then you go to to another client and they're like, hey, we want Bob, and Bob's already taken by client A. Is that a hard thing to manage, Chad?
It isn't, because our VAs are only assigned to one customer. We only do full-time people for you.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And so we will if we're going to put one with JJ's company, then they're dedicated to JJ's company and nobody else. So we looked at the model where they would flip companies, maybe half a day here and half a day there. But then it's hard for them to transition. And one of the things we try to tell people is you got to stay in your flow state. As a coach, I'll tell you, batch your day, do bulk scheduling, block scheduling. And we want that for the VAs too. So we want them to stay in your company, in your zone all the time. And inside of that area, we want them to block schedule stuff too. So do all the billings on these days, do all the reconciliations on these days. So we really try to narrow that down. And I will say that we're not one of these. It's funny, the client said it to me one time, and he's like, you're not the most flexible guy, are you, Chad? I'm like, we're really not. I mean, it's kind of like you could come and say, Chad, this is how I do it. And I'm like, that's awesome. But remember, you came to me because you were overwhelmed and you had a little bit of a problem. Here's how we do it, which is also the way you're going to do it if you're using us, at least for 6 months. Are we going to mold and tailor to you? Absolutely. Are we going to, we are going to have a title block on every drawing one of our estimated admins works on. And it's going to be color-coded, and it's going to be the color. You can choose the colors. You have lots of freedom within the colors. But for you to say we're not going to color-code it and we're not going to have a title block, we're probably not a good supplier for you, because it's just proven. We know it's going to work, and it's important. We have a 3-month minimum contract, so I've got 90 days to make you a believer. So I can't let you mess that up for me.
Next question, and I'm just trying to post them like if I was in the audience, because I think I should disclose to the audience on our side, we like our accounting. We use Chad knows this, but we use a lot of Filipino type stuff on our accounting side, and we've just recently looked at on the estimating side. Unlike the very popular India and Bangladesh type stuff, we've looked at more of the Nicaraguan Central America model. Just so that it's in the same time zone, which, there's arguments about, you've heard both sides of the spectrum on this, the onshoring versus the offshoring, the time versus working in slack time versus not, the language difference, all those kind of things. Can AI supplement all that? We could sit here and probably pontificate on those topics alone for about 3 hours. But just to put it in context, I'm bringing that up to ask you, Chad. I'm sure a big question you get all the time is, hey, Chad, how are these people going to be able to respond to me in a timely fashion? Are they up 24 hours a day? Blah, blah, blah. How do you respond to that? And how do you address those concerns?
But it's funny. One of the biggest comments I get from contractors when we're starting with them, they're like, I don't know, man. I just don't think we're a remote company. Which my standard response is, do you have guys in the field? And they're like, oh, yeah. You're a remote company. It's just, you are. Now, you might not be doing these things remote, but that doesn't mean you're not a remote company. So we set regular work hours. We don't utilize like these kind of things where you're like keystroke monitoring and stuff like that. We do use a lot of internal messaging, not email, because people pay us to make their email better. So we don't use email to contact with inside our companies. We use Slack or Google Meet or Google Chat or something like that, Teams, depending on the company. But we have internal messaging, and we do have them say, hey, let them know you're in the morning. Let them know you're available every now and then, every couple of hours, at least tell them what you're working on. Tell somebody. So then, so you're in there. It's kind of like then you're in the cube farm. Raise your hand, let them know you're alive. And just stay in the zone with people. There is a culture that you have to cultivate. You have to be able to include remote people on your company. We have things we call e-pneumods, which are, it's basically like a water cooler meeting where it's just, we all download the same background for our Zoom meeting, and then we all meet at the same bar online or whatever. And we just chit chat, no shop talk. It's like, we know we're going to take a hit on that and just meet there and say, hey, everybody. Find out about their pets, their kids, their stuff like that. So that's a big part of it. Having a remote employee will make your whole company, just one remote employee will make your whole company run a little bit different, because you have to have accountability. And so I have a lot of guys that'll come to me and they'll say, I have a signature talk I give based on trust versus control. Guys are like, I'm just a control freak. There's no way to work for me. Like, you're not a control freak. Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. That's a personality problem. We can't fix you. We're going to find somebody else. But most people, it's not that they are a control freak. It's that they don't trust people to do what they're asking them to do. And the engineer in me says, well, that's no problem. We got a formula for that, Just like love, we can build trust with a formula. So it's doing the right thing over time with results. So we build a task accountability stuff. We use ClickUp a lot. We use Task Manager in Microsoft. But it's like, hey, just start assigning tasks and then see that they get done, and then close the loop on those tasks to let the person know they did a good or bad job. And as you do that over time, it's like, I trust my kid to drive my truck, but I don't trust him to drive my wife's car. You have degrees of trust. So it's okay that you don't trust somebody implicitly, but you don't want to rely on a system that says you're 1,300 keystrokes in on the day, you should be at 1,500. I don't think you're doing your job. They might be that day, That's a bad sign when you need to do that. But if you can set goals and say, this is what I need to get done, and here's how I'm going to hold you accountable for it, and then you're good at it, then you do it. And then the best secret I've given coaching clients is, we, business owners, visionaries, whatever you want to call them, we are not typically good at holding people accountable, in a managed way. That's a great place to use a VA. We use a virtual assistant I use a virtual assistant, an executive assistant, to hold my people accountable on my behalf. And they also serve as a buffer between my, jumping transitional focus of attention, at one time I delegated the same task to 3 different people. And I didn't realize I'd done that. And the first one had done it already by the time the other 2 I'd asked the other 2 to do it, but I never even checked to see if it was done. That's a problem. But, the VAs now, my executive assistant has kind of become a buffer for that, which makes our culture better for that.
So, Chad, let's a couple things here that I want to address. Let's go down the coaching path a little bit now. We focused on the VAs. Maybe I start here. Do you get the coaching, quote unquote, deals as a byproduct of the VAs, or do you get the VA work as a byproduct of the coaching? I'm sure it's both, but which seems to get, like, how do you get in the door first usually?
So I think that VAs we have more VAs than we have coaching clients for sure. Because I can only coach, 5 or 6 clients at a time.
Because you do that, right? That's
you just personally. And I love it. Usually a coaching client is going to hire a VA somewhere in the process, because they are coming to me because they're trying to get time back. Like, I'm not the guy where you're like, Chad, I need to double sales. Can I hire you as a sales coach? You can, but you'll be disappointed. I super lazy. I want to turn you into the most strategically lazy person you can be. And that means we're going to get things off of you. Most of the time, my coaching client already has a successful business. They just are stuck in startup mode. It's like they went to boot camp and stayed there. They never became regular military. And so it's getting them to where they don't feel guilty about not doing 80-hour weeks. There's a lot of guilt. It's like, I don't want to ask somebody to do something that I'm unwilling to do. I'm like, you should ask somebody because you suck at that. And being okay with the fact that you're not doing your own books, or you're not, doing your own closings or whatever it might be that you feel like you're supposed to do, but you hate. We want you to do the things that only you can do and that you enjoy doing, and then get you home on time if that's what you want, or get you more time to do the parts of it that you like, figuring out that goal. And almost always it's teaching you to delegate. Most people just don't know how to delegate. And so there's some tools, and then there's some, processes, but we need someone to delegate things to. And if you have an internal person, perfect. If you don't, we can place a VA that's an executive assistant and start getting these things off of you onto them, which builds capacity for you, which we can then use to change other things in your company.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
But I'm not a sales coach. I'm not a,
It's more, to summarize it, what I heard was it's more macro, going through the growth curve, maybe some behavioral stuff, the true leadership type training and coaching. It's not so much the X's and O's and the blocking and tackling. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing it correctly, but it just seems like that's where your niche is. Like you brought it up earlier, your niche in the coaching side is in getting leaders out of the way of themselves primarily.
Yeah, it's none of it is like this. Sometimes guys come in and they're like, hey man, I really want to do this. I want to find that thing. It's like they're, you meet these stock people and they're like, what's the stock that's going to make me rich? A mutual fund, and stop rating it. I don't, I don't know. There is no big get rich quick things that I can see that consistently work. It's do the boring things and get them away from you. Just return calls, be where you say you're going to be, delegate things to people that are good at them, and then get rid of that guilt.
Let's go back to the VA side. I'm sure the audience would love to know this, Chad, is in the years now that you've done the VAs4Construction, what is the positive feedback that you get as far as, again, back to these testimonials of, hey, Chad, I didn't believe you. It's worked. And these are the 5 things that, or these are the 2 things that have helped. These are the 3 things that have helped. I'm sure you've got enough data now and enough testimonials to say, what are those top things that the audience can relate to as they listen to you describe it?
So my favorite feedback I ever received from a client was from a framing contractor. Great business, still has a phenomenal business. And he called me on a Thursday from his truck. He was driving down the road. I was like, hey man, what's going on? He goes, I just want to let you know I'm on the way to the river. He has a river house. I'm like, okay, that sounds, you just rubbing it in, what's this all about? Because I'm sitting here in my office right now. He goes, no, I've never gone to my house on a Thursday. I'm not coming back until Sunday. This is the first time I've ever done this. I was like, well, that's fantastic. But we had put in systems where he has a project management assistant who also serves as his executive assistant and his emails and stuff like that. And she can handle all of his day-to-day, ins and outs kind of things. Payroll for him is a pretty much a one-click kind of thing. He's maybe 15 minutes and he's got, 20 subs that he gets paid and 10 or so in-house employees. It happens really fast, so that was the best because that guy was happy. He was elated and headed to the river. I was a little miffed because he didn't invite me to join, so that was my favorite. And then a lot of it is, you take these old school estimators and project managers in these construction companies, it's as manly as it gets, steel, concrete, stuff like that. And they're like, I just don't understand. And then we try it. And these assistants, and most of them are women, they're just so highly organized, and they're just got this great servant-minded approach to things, and they will, one of our core values is proactively assertive. They are looking to take work away from you so that you can move on, and so they can estimate more jobs, they can document stuff. Like a big part of it is, I read somewhere like 90% of the data we collect in construction is not used or acted on. We collect all these, we're supposed to know how many hours we did, stuff like that, but many times you go back and say, show me a job of this square footage in this region of what we charged for and what was our margin. It'd be great numbers to know, and it should affect the way we price it, but we just don't have time because you're running so fast. But if there's somebody I can ask to go get it and then come back with it, then you can make better decisions and better quotes. But a lot of it is just taking, and we're seeing that we never replaced an employee. We've only ever supported and enhanced employees. Now, we may have made it where you didn't have to hire another project manager, but you didn't do away with the project manager that you had. That project manager is happier. They like their work better because, when you're hiring a project manager, you tell them, yeah, you're going to run these jobs, you're going to do this, you're telling them all this kind of, you're going to do all these things. You don't tell them about the mundane stuff because, you want them to take the job. So those are the things that we keep the people in the areas that they're good at, that they like doing. And then the back end part of it just kind of helps facilitate their work. It makes them look better. And it actually serves as a good retention tool. It's like, hey, you can leave and go to this other company, but will you have a VA like you have here? Well, in an ideal world, perhaps, not pick up another client at the same time, but no, that is that they stay with you because their job is more enjoyable.
How much of, let's take the extreme, Chad, when you go into the old curmudgeon type businesses in the VA, I don't want to put too much emphasis on this, but at the same token, how much of do you see just tech illiteracy as far as like you're talking about data that we as a general populace, meaning the construction space, we don't collect and interpret the data enough. But how much of that do you see as just being neophytes on the tech side?
I see tech impatience.
It's not ignorance, it's impatience. Got it.
Yeah, it's like they're okay with, we'll do a daily report online. That's fine. I'll do it on my phone. I'll do it on my iPad. That's fine. If you want me to do that, I'll do it. But it had better work. Like right away the first time. Like even if I fat finger it, it should fix it, change its languages, and make it colorful. And I'm like, it's not a miracle. It's just a form. You got to fill it out right. So if we can, and that's one of the things that I even built our own software at one point in time. Do not start a software company unless you have an extraordinary amount of money you want to get rid of. It's just never.
Geez, I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, that's a great. You can spend a lot of money on software and never have any. But that did teach me that don't ever ask a guy or a person in the field a question you can get the answer to any other way. And it cracks me up to see daily reports that say fill out the weather. Like Google knows your weather way better than you do. It's like it's so limit the number of questions you're going to ask, and that's the great thing about when you're utilizing VAs, we can pull data. You can ask a VA all the questions you want to, because their data is accessible, and then they can find it. But don't ask a field person anything that's going to be a distraction unless you absolutely have to know it, and two, they're the only one that can answer.
Well, Stan,
that's served us really well, and that makes that field person. When the VA becomes a crutch for the field person, you're winning. They'll make it work.
So now let's go to the other end of the spectrum, Chad. Is what obstacles do you still see in the VA paradigm is in your relationship with these companies? Because you can't, let's be honest, 100% perfection is impossible. But with some humility and transparency here, what are the things that you're trying to crack or at least improve on that is still a struggle in that VA perception?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm an amazing person, so humility is obviously my strong suit. But no, we run into a lot of, we take one thing And it's almost frustrating to me. Like, let's say we bring you on as a client. And you're like, Chad, I want to get my email sorted because we do executive assistance. And you're like, okay, fine. And you just, begrudgingly let somebody into your email. Then suddenly your email is way better, and you're spending much less time on there, and it's great. And then I say, okay, let us take over your scheduling. Let's get them on your calendar. And because they're already on your email, we know where you're supposed to be and all the promises you're making. Let's go ahead and commit to all of it. Chad, my calendar is really important to me. So it's like every step is a new step, and me being patient enough, which just means now I delegate this part to a program manager and say, hey, look, you got to bring them over. It's like, you got to, it's like, it takes a very long time to, and even like when we work with project managers, like, yeah, I get it. We're going to have them do, this task. Yeah, they can do all the daily reports and stuff like that. But me, I'm going to be doing the billing because that's important. And I'm like, it is important, but you don't really focus on it, because you don't have time. I get that. But, it's just, as you cross one hurdle, you don't build a lot of, I guess, inertia. It's a new task every time.
Yeah, I could see how that would, being honest, I could see how it get frustrating. It's like you've earned the street cred with them already here. It's like, really, you don't, back to what you were saying, don't you trust me to take you down the next path and the next path and the next path? So I could see that just being a byproduct of human nature, right? Back to trust.
And sometimes you have to really guard against out of sight, out of mind. Like, let's say we get a VA in and they start taking over 5 things for you. And that's maybe got that person working 5 out of 8 hours a day consistent. When you're like, well, Jen, I want to get 8 hours a day. So do I. But, at the price point, this is okay for you. You're like, okay, this took a lot off of me and I got a lot of time back. And then you kind of let off the gas. And then the VA's got over there running, and pretty soon you're going to forget what they're doing. And then we're going to show up on a budget somewhere, and you're like, I don't know what they're doing anyway. And you haven't given anything else to them because you were happy with that success. And so that's why one of our core values is that proactively assertive. We won't let a VA be happy with just doing what you're willing to just give over. They want to keep coming back. And then sometimes I have to get involved and say, hey, the VA's telling me that, you stopped adding things to them. We need to add some more things to them. And I've never had somebody come in and go, well, I don't have anything else to add. It's really, I don't know how to hand it over, or I don't know what to hand over next. I don't really, sometimes they're like, I don't think I can hand these other things over. And I always have an answer for those. But it does get harder as you delegate more and more. Sometimes you can delegate some really easy things. That goes quickly. Then you get in this medium zone, and it gets a little harder because you're starting to delegate bigger things. But the idea is you're getting better at it, so you're okay, and you're building that level of trust up. So it is. It's not a uniform or linear pattern of growth. It's within that person. So it's that part is a bit of a mystery to me because I'm like, hell, I'll delegate everything. But not everybody's ready for that rate of change. Or when I look at it, waiting for the client to say, man, I got this problem, and, asking them questions, as a coach, you're supposed to ask a lot of questions and not give very many answers. A consultant, you give answers. A coach, you ask questions and let them come to an answer. And that normally requires you being quiet and listening. And I've been told by my wife that is not my strong suit.
So did you say something, Chad? I don't know.
I saw it go.
Speaking of paying attention, you said one key phrase there, and that is rate of change. I could see how that would be the biggest, instead of a common, but the biggest differentiator and the common denominator between all people is like, think of that VA that is used to someone over here that loves change, the speed of change, and others that don't. I could see that being a big, not an obstacle, but with that's your biggest opportunity, right? It's almost like the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity all wrapped into one cohesive box.
It is, and I had a current client kind of really bring this to the forefront because he was getting frustrated. He's like, I got all these changes that we're going to make. And then, you know, we've made this list of all these things we're doing. He goes, and I just got to hang on for 6 months so I can push all these through and then we'll be done. And I was like, hold on. Wait a minute. We got to have you need to get used to a continuous, slow, agonizing rate of change that pretty much never ends. And he's like, what? I was like, oh yeah, this is going to kind of suck. I was like, but it's not. And I said, you got to do a lot of small steps. And if you don't think they'll add up, turn your back on a 2-year-old for 30 seconds. That little thing can hardly walk. They can cover 3 miles on a mall. I mean, you gotta let people change, and your people don't change that fast. And you got to build trust and momentum and those kind of things. So I was like, no, this isn't we're going to plow through and then it's all going to be good to go. This is a marathon, you know, probably more like an ultra, not and otherwise people can't keep up with you.
Another question I have for you, Chad, and this one, you know, this is kind of a tough question, is does the VAs4Construction, does the model work in where once your clients accept you or bring you in, are you finding that you're there for 12 to 16 months and then they exit? Are you finding that most of them say, all right, Chad, this worked great. Now I only need 50% of the VA that I once had, or now I need 150%. I think the audience would love to know, like, hey, Chad, with what you've done so far, are your clients staying and growing, or are they, like, what's the life cycle of the VA relationship with a typical customer?
Well, we're young. I mean, we'll be honest. We're young. We're 2 years in, or a little over 2 years. We've only had one client that released a VA, and they had a downturn. And they said, you know, hey, just economically, we're not going to be able to hold this VA right now.
Fair enough. I mean, you can't have about 1,000. Yeah.
They get through 90 days, and 90 days, and that's what we say. You know, we tell people, like, it's a 3-month minimum, because the first month is figuring out what we're going to do. The second month is kind of teaching you and teaching them. And the third month is where you really get the return that's really starting to maximize. If we don't have you as a raving lunatic for it by the end of 90 days, it's probably not going to happen. And then we'll separate. You know, but after that, you know, it's typically what we're seeing is people are adding another one. Because once you get that outsourced delegation mindset, and that becomes part of who you are, you'll start doing all kinds of stuff. You know, you'll be trying to get you'll be delegating all kinds of stuff, or trying to. There's some of these.
Well, I know we've adopted that too. Back to what I was saying, what we had done, we experimented, and then once there was a comfort zone there, it was, you know, our accounting staff or under our CFO, pretty soon it was like, oh wow, look at, we got this and this and this, and then we had an acquisition in there, and then we expanded more. And it's been a really good thing for our company. So
yeah, it's kind of like when you almost like when you hire your first employee, like if you're like this one person shop and you're just cranking away, and then you finally hire an employee, it's suddenly you're like, oh, this is much better. We can go now. There are always these little, I don't know if you call them force multipliers, or these inflection points where your company's either going to go down or up. There's not much stabilizing in business that I've seen. People are either growing or they're shrinking. It's hard.
But thinking of it, like, I'm sure you do it too, as far as being in different forum groups and different discussions like this with different verticals within the business space. It seems like, again, with the shortage of human capital out there, Chad, that the hybrid approach, if you have the right mindset, the hybrid approach is pretty darn proficient. When you look at the excellent companies where they'll have a percentage of the VA type structure with growth in-house as well, you know, like instead of 100% hire within, instead of 100% sub out, the hybrid, when you can match it to the culture and kind of the nomenclature of the company itself, that's where you see really sustainable growth, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things that happens with you. There was a movie, I can't remember, it was a movie about like a band. I mean, there's probably a lot of movies about bands, but anyway, they come in there. Yeah. I mean, you should be able to find this with no problem with a quick Google. But in this movie, they bring this young band in, and their lead guitarist is not going to stick with the band for whatever reason. And so the guy's like, yeah, we're going to replace your guitarist. And the lead singer or whatever is like, I don't know, you think he can handle, and they bring this guy in who just lays it down, just slays it on the guitar. And you're just like, no, your guy was just the best guitarist, It is not the best guitarist in the world. And VAs, we do fight that in the initial part of it, is we're like, well, how do I know they're going to be able to understand my business? Well, the deal is when you can recruit the world, there's a lot more needles in the haystack than there are in your region, area, country. And just because they're in the Philippines or they're in Nicaragua or Mexico City, wherever they are, there's smart people all over the world. If all the smart people in the United States, that would scare me to death. Yeah. So especially during election season, I don't think they're here. I don't know how many are here. Not many, but yeah, there are good people, So, but you gotta have that mindset, Somebody's gotta know and be able to do it.
Take you down another avenue here we've got about 10 minutes left if we want to use it all. Talk to me about what precipitated you doing your own podcast, and what was the mindset that you had when you developed that? How long have you been doing it now?
Oh, I don't know. It's a few years. It was the most selfish thing I've ever done. As I'm a contractor, and general contractors have no interest in talking to me, and architects have no interest in talking to me. It doesn't matter that I'm an expert in my field. When I want something from you, I will get a number. And then after we have a number, if I have questions, I will do it, and then I'll complain once we start the job. That's the general contractor mindset. I don't think they mean to be that way, but there. So I've found that if I called and said, hey, man, I'd like to talk to you about this job that you're bidding, and explain the pros and cons and all this kind of stuff, they're like, no. But if I called and said, I'd like to have you on a podcast, I can create a friendship. And as my wife would say, I'm a really nice guy when you first meet me. I don't know what happens after that. Apparently, I don't ever ask that question. Apparently, I'm just good in the moment, So the podcast was a way for me to connect with potential customers that would not normally talk to me before we were actually bidding a job. And then it became, I just enjoyed collecting stories. I loved hearing the different things about it. And so it started to morph. And even now, we just shifted our model again, where now that I've moved from contracting into coaching and these VAs, our podcast, Get the Intel, is really more about now saying, okay, let's talk to people that can teach us about business. If you're a VA customer, you're a coaching client, what questions do you have? And who do I know that can answer that question? And then we'll go out and ask them that. And for me, it's awesome because I interview people for free on a podcast, and then I remember what they say, and then I tell it to one of my coaching clients and charge them for it. It's fantastic.
I love that circle of life, right?
And I do tell them thank you, and I normally do tell them I am totally stealing that. But yeah, it has become just a way for me to learn a lot of things, and hopefully that the people will learn.
Well, I can give that same, not to steal your thunder, because you're the guest here today, but it's kind of how we met, and I feel the same way when people ask me, well, why do you do it, and how do you do it, and what's evolved in it? And a lot of people know that at one time Robert Johnson was my sidekick on this, hence the Mac and Bleu. And when he left, for other reasons, it forced me to be a better listener. In other words, I was a lazy listener when we were co-hosting, and now it makes me actually have to listen more attentively, and my ADD has to be focused, back to, oh, hey, Chad's talking. I need to generally listen to what he's doing. And so I feel it's helped me tremendously to have connect. Back to your thing, it's about connectivity, and not just for selfish reasons, but for your brand, your company, or whatever. And if you have like an altruistic piece in there where you're trying to pay it forward sincerely, which I know you are too, it makes you feel good, right? So
it does. And I just love hearing that. I interviewed the lady that there's the CEO of Hint Water. I've interviewed the CEO of Boll and Branch. Okay, well, for one, the only reason I'm going to interview the guy is because his daughter was sweet weights with my daughter at Clemson. And so it was like, hey, he met me. He was like, man, again, he's like, he first met me and he liked me. I don't know if he still likes me, but he did initially, enough for to get a podcast interview. But you can learn so much from them because they think on a scale, and sometimes when you meet with them, they think on a scale where the world is just wide open. Like, if you need $100, nobody has to lose $100. They create $100, and then you go and you meet with somebody who's just, this emerging technology or technique, and they've got 3 people and they're just barely getting by, but they've got that thing, like this thing that they do that you never would have thought of because you're just not that desperate anymore, and that happened to me too. You do get to a place in business where, when you don't have anything, risking everything was no big deal. It was kind of like a big joke. They're like, I'll take you for everything I had. I was like, you don't want to owe that much money. I'm like, then you accumulate some stuff and you start to become guarded. And you're like, now you're protecting and you're not that same person anymore. And so when you're interviewing people at those different stages, it's really cool to find somebody who says, like, I've got something disposable that I can go and try something crazy. Or somebody who says, I'm so desperate, I tried this because it was crazy. Or somebody in the middle who's like, I'm scared to lose something, so I did this. And you can learn from all of them. But it's definitely a different crowd.
Chad, last question of the day. What didn't I ask you, or what would you like to share with the audience about something we didn't discuss? We didn't, like a rabbit hole we didn't go down that is just you want to share, like it's near and dear to you, or some sort of message you want to get out, either about you, one of your companies. Kind of like I said, it's open mic for Chad right now.
I think that probably one of the greatest things that we ever did as parents was having random and uncorrelated punishments for our children. I think more people should do that. Like, I never let our kids know what the punishment was going to be for a crime until they did it. Because I never wanted them to sit around and say, I think that'd be worth it. And like one day, like we had rules, like if you burped at the table, you had to run to the end of the cul-de-sac and back. And one day one of our kids did something and I was like, all right, that's it. No condiments for a week. And they're like, what? And I don't remember what it was, but I remember it. And that kid was like 15 years old and he started crying. What are we having for dinner? I'm like, we're having meatloaf, French fries, hamburgers. And there's no ketchup. There's no mustard. I don't know. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, but that's been one of my favorites.
That was probably one of the most original things that I've ever heard on this podcast. So I love it.
It was, we had some unique, probably now illegal ways of raising children that, like, we had everybody that's raised a teenage, or not even a teenage, but like a, preteen boy, they won't shower very well. And so I was like, you know what? From now on, I'd go up and I was like, all right, I go up to them, I took a Crayola, a washable marker, and just drew on their head, behind their ear, on their back, legs. I was like, when all of those marks are gone, you're clean. And we did that a few times, and then it's always fun to sneak one Sharpie mark.
We fun what you did with the Sharpie, though, right, Chad?
Yeah, you sneak that one Sharpie in there to keep them honest. You're then just scrubbing their little thigh till it's red. You're like, that's what you get. You may be miserable, so you can take that. So, yeah, I think.
All right, well, we're going to wrap it up. I just I'll give a little plug for you. So for any of you that are interested, Chad Gill, again, if you want to look it up, it's Laminin Coaching. He also has VAs4Construction. It's VAS with the number 4, construction.com, if I remember right. And naturally, when we post all this, we'll have the links on the posting, but just want to do the shout out. And do not forget, Get the Intel is his podcast as well. It's on Spotify, Apple. When I looked it up, he's on the usual channels just like us. So great job, Chad. And just thank you for being part of the circle where we pay it forward to each other, and honored to have you on as a guest today.
Same thing. Thank you, JJ. I really appreciate the time and the conversation.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levinsky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday